Good evening, and welcome to Having a Drink with Mink. I'm your host, Jason Mink, as no one else wanted the job. Thanks for dialing us up on whatever you're watching this on. It's great to be back once again, so let's do a thing. You have your beverage ready? Good. Then let's blast off to 1979. The silver screen had already gone back to a time long ago, in a galaxy far, far away, and was poised to go where no man had gone before. But in the middle of these two revelatory space-based films appeared another, and this one had teeth. Alien burst through the pop culture chest cavity on May 25th, 1979. This R-rated excursion into the cosmos concerned the crew of the commercial space tug Nostromo, redirected from their journey home to Earth to investigate a mysterious signal. In the process, the ship picks up a stowaway in the form of a murderous 9-foot alien with a taste for, well, just about anything. Directed by Ridley Scott and featuring visual concepts from visionary artist H.R. Giger, Alien proved to be unlike anything audiences had seen before. In spite of borrowing liberally from numerous sources, the completed film proved to be something entirely all its own. Less sci-fi and more horror, in spite of its rarefied setting. A commercial success, it was decided that Alien would be licensed in the same way that Star Wars before it had been, with posters, games, and, of course, an action figure. However, unlike George Lucas's space fantasy, Alien had a hard R rating, which meant pitching a toy to kids was a dicey proposition. But more on that in a moment. If you were like me, and 9 at the time, then you may have missed Alien at the theater. The closest many of us kids got were the trading card set, which featured key scenes from the film. And while these days I'd be thrilled to have a Harry Dean Stanton card, back then I'm guessing I was more of a facehugger kind of guy. These cards were awesome in that they gave you an unflinching look at things that might otherwise only be on the screen for a split second. And the gum? I think I still have cuts on the inside of my cheeks from it. Do you remember games? Boy, those sure were fun. Even better when you got to stalk and eat your opponents. Here's a nice example of a board game from Kenner featuring a beauty shot of our titular alien. Boxes like this were great because they included a picture of kids having fun, in case you forgot how. The inside offers a colorful game board featuring images from the film, along with some cardboard tokens. Wait, cardboard? Come on, Kenner. We expect a little more from you. Next up, the Alien movie viewer. And I take it back. This was the closest most of us got to actually seeing the movie. Here's young Mink with a viewer of his own, although mine was Star Wars themed. Star Wars was red and blue, right? I know that I was. It came in a groovy box that did a great job of pitching the product. A large open section of the cardboard allowed the potential owner to turn the crank and view the included film. Pretty smart as such things go. A lot of toys of this era were still sealed up in cardboard boxes, so to be able to actually preview the product was a big win. It even allowed kids who didn't get to buy one to at least watch the movie in the toy aisle, which was a beautiful gesture on Kenner's part. The viewer itself was issued in a severe black to match the movie's tone and space theme. Pretty sharp, as such things go. Now, do you remember when I mentioned controversial toys a few parsecs ago? Kenner's 18-inch Alien was a smash with kids, but a bomb with parents who not only groused about a toy based on an R-rated film, but refused to buy them as well. If you were lucky enough to get one, like my buddy Owen, you might also have an overly moralistic father who took it from you, scarring you for life. Okay, maybe that's a stretch, but I can tell that my buddy would have liked to have had one on his toy shelf. And who wouldn't? Well, the prevailing toy lines of time clocked in at a meager 3 3/4 inches. Kenner's Alien was a towering 18 inches tall. That's half a foot taller than G.I. Joe. Not only that, but the figure had arms attached by an elastic band, which allowed them to grab your other toys. And its second mouth shot out, just like in the movie. Alright, maybe a little gimmicky to we cynical adults, but ideal for replicating essential brain-eating action. Unlike other toys of this scale, who sacrifice detail for size, Kenner's Alien is fairly faithful to the creature's on-screen appearance. There are loads of little folds, vents, and chitinous protrusions that echo its cinematic counterpart. These catch the shadows nicely, giving the monochromatic paint scheme a sense of depth and proportion that a plaything this large might otherwise lack. And while the articulation is limited to the neck, shoulders, hips, and tail, the figure moves well enough for play or display. This particular one even has the skull dome, which many examples lack. Scuda Models issued this mold in hobby kit form for the overseas market. It's a neat piece in itself, as you can either assemble the bits with glue or use elastic to replicate the action of the Kenner toy. Alien had a sequel in 1980-something, but for all that film's high points, the original remains my favorite. Remember, in space, no one can hear you fart. Although, you're probably in a spacesuit, so maybe try and hold that in. Okay, on to the box of comics, and no, I'm not proud of that last joke. We begin with a grin and some Steve Ditko and Captain Atom. Decades before he blew the DCU up in Kingdom Come, the Captain was a Charlton hero, and Ditko was on hand to render his atomic adventures. This book features reprints, including the awe-inspiring origin of the title character. Here he assures a hapless general that his glowing body is safe to be around. Yeah, they said that about the A-bomb tests too. You better hope you've already had all the kids you want, General. In the end, the good captain is given a costume and he zooms off to even sparklier adventures. Next up, another Marvel mainstay whose split-stand scene was Jack, King Kirby, who took his ball over to DC Comics for a kick-around. The results were mixed from a commercial standpoint, but today we old guys can't get enough of books like OMAC, the One-Man Army Corps. The King's high-flung Captain America of the future concept ran wild, inspired by pop culture influences and shaped by the creator's own unique vision and aesthetic. The imagery almost explodes off the printed page, which is quite the feat considering it's just old ink and newsprint. Let's pop over to Marvel and a nice early issue of Iron Man. That's right, back when old Shellhead had to plug himself into a Chevy cigarette lighter every 3 issues just to stay alive. This issue offers 2 big villains for the price of 1, the Uncanny Unicorn and the Red Ghost. Oddly enough, I made custom figures of both of these characters back in the day. Sorry for the picture quality, these are ancient history, figuratively and literally. Inside, we run into Corny pitching a fit. He was always having issues, what with his brain being constantly rattled by the laser he wore on his dome. Red Ghost appears and, my, what a sprightly little fellow. And if the Ghost is on the scene, can his simian pals be far behind? Apes! You know, for those of you just listening at home, and did Corny just get kicked in the junk? That's pretty low, Tony. Following on, and it's an AC Comics reprint featuring the Lemonade Kid. Who? I know, right? Tex Mason is a ranch hand with a difference. And what a difference. As the Lemonade Kid, he tackles the Old West's weirdest menaces like Humpty Dumpty? Alright, so creating supervillains is hard. If you can pilfer some public domain characters for your own purposes, then more power to you. Speaking of, the Lemonade Kid himself is currently in the public domain, so if you've got a hankering to tell some stories, our boy Tex Mason is happy to get to work. After all, custom-tailored yellow and green suits don't come cheap. Here's a book that I was thrilled to stumble across. It's Pacific Comics Rocketeer number 2 by the late, great Dave Stevens. Dave was taken from us far too soon, but he left behind some truly top-notch work. And while the Rocketeer parts of this issue are swell, it's the Betty pages that truly steal one's breath away. Stevens' take on the brunette bombshell remains untouched, a titanic tribute to the queen of the pinups that captures the model's magic without any sordid additions. The rest of this issue is devoted to Missing Man, an unusual Steve Ditko character from the mid-1970s. Although a hero made of only arms, legs, and face seems mundane next to the Payne family. This cantankerous clan has carnage on their collective mind. Stevie's homicidal hillbillies are a real hoot, although one can't help but feel that Ditko actually thinks folks out there really like this. The moral absolutism at play here feels at odds with the gratuitous violence dished out at 3-panel intervals. I get it. The artist isn't high on the sons of the soil. Still, no reason to represent them as mother-snuffing, cat-hating psychopaths. Then it's Mark Kirby, and who is Silver Star? Why, he's Morgan Miller. And we're off to a good start. That's a nice, healthy, alliterative name. Based on a movie screenplay by Jack Kirby and Steve Sherman, the story concerns a soldier who develops fantastic powers after being subjected to strange experiments as a child. It's pretty consistent with Jack's other work of the time, creator-owned stuff that seemed more about putting the King's distinctive stamp on ideas and concepts rather than developing new ones. And that? Well, that is one big guitar. I judged E-Man unfairly as a young reader. Initially, I thought it was meant to be softcore porn or something, based solely on Joe Staten's illustrations of Novocaine. Later I realized it was less about the perk and more about the quirk. The story concerns the Entropy Twins, a pair of alien-created bioweapons brought to Earth to take down the Man of E. In spite of their fantastic abilities, E-Man deals with them permanently, changing their molecular composition so, if they get near enough to each other to use their powers, they'll be torn to atoms. Poetic stuff. And then, another Ditko story. Would you believe it? This one features Killjoy, the agile acrobat archetype, which is generic, but fine, if there's a good story. However, the superhero here is mere window dressing for a rant against liberalism and its soft approach to criminality. This seems very out of place in this type of comic, but I reckon Charlton wasn't looking to rock the boat when it came to one of their most prolific content providers. I wonder what E-Man would think. Alright, look, we gotta stop in Riverdale for a minute. I know, I'm sorry. I gotta see a guy about a thing. Bad enough Archie is always trying to get into Veronica's pants. Now he's after yours. Now, I'm not saying that he should be locked up. But hell, I'm not saying it either. Maybe give it a try for a few weeks and just see if things calm down any. At the very least, it'll give us other fellers a chance to get a date with a new gal. She seems nice. It's been long suspected, but here's bulletproof evidence that Betty and Veronica are the same person. At least one is a clone or something. Maybe that's how Mr. Lodge made his money. I wonder how many times he's put one in the back of Archie's skull, only to have to clone a new one in time for his date with Veronica. Might explain a few things. And look who it is. Very continental, Miss Clump. Next up, Miss Betty Cooper is perhaps a little too nice when it comes to showing her affections for the aforementioned waffle-headed scofflaw. Here our pal Juggy tries to set her straight. Not sure who drew this issue, but it feels more like a mad parody than an actual Archie strip. Note the Woody and hang time and the over-the-top facial expressions. It's not that you didn't see these things pop up on occasion, it's just that they were doled out sparingly. This is pretty over the top. In the back was this ad for a life-size poster featuring those lovable lads from Liverpool. I forget their name. I know people were shorter in the past, but this feels a tad misleading. And imagine this full-size Ringo with no face on the wall of your teenage bedroom. Chilling. Then it's Crime Does Not Pay, 51, and these old covers didn't fool around. Here a couple of on-the-lam jailbirds hole up in a tenement apartment, taking these poor residents hostage. Can't help but think that things would gone a bit differently if they'd busted in on the Payne family. Mighty different indeed. And how about Clay Fogelman? He's the meanest man in crime. Oh sure, with a name like that, you'd think that he was a pharmacist or something. Maybe he's mean because he's constantly dealing with our facile preconceptions. Or maybe just like shooting guys. The electric chair murders concerns a dicey dame out to put a hit on her hubby. Oh, not at first. Initially, she tries to perform the act herself. Multiple times, in fact. Unfortunately for her, husbands were built up to code back then and were a lot harder to take down. In the end, she recruits some poor sucker to do the deed for her, but ultimately takes the rap for it anyway. She sure hates to die, notes this gray, featureless representative of the system. Wryly observed by men. Let's finish things off with the first issue of Fantastic Tales from our friends at IW Comics. Oh sure, the cover looks pretty tame, but IWs are usually wilder than they look. So let's roll the dice. And we start off strong with City of the Living Dead. This tale concerns a cursed band of pirates turned into undead fiends by a vengeful spirit. They go ape when some unwitting innocents show up and have their murderous way with them. It's only the interference of said vengeful spirit that staves off doom and, oh my god, what's going on with that gal's shape? Hold on to your potato, Dr. Jones. There are sharp curves ahead. The Witches Come at Midnight is a wild ride featuring some truly freaky critters. Oddly enough, these giant crow-looking things echo my own horror novel, The Cult, which is available at the link below. At any rate, birds this big aren't good, especially when the air is already full of imps and demons. And if that wasn't bad enough, who should show up but Satan? I know he's evil and all, but going to the orthodontist on occasion doesn't need to be a moral issue. You're the devil. You can afford some caps. We wrap things up with this grim little bon mot about greed, betrayal, but mostly about disembodied heads haunting a guy. You know the drill. Intrepid explorer puts his foot in it and ends up with a well-deserved, if not macabre, punishment. In this case, the heads of those he's wronged sprout out of his arms, which makes social situations awkward at best. Heck, he can't even wear his favorite sport coat anymore. In the 1950s, that was a fate truly worse than death. And there you have it. Thanks for joining in the fun. I know that I got a kick out of it. I hope that you did too. As always, there's more to come, so stay tuned. And if you really dug it, please leave us a comment, as that helps with the algorithmic voodoo that gets these videos seen. Until the next time, I'm Jason Mink. Cheers.